the most impactful way that I have found to do my work is to go where they are, not for them to come to me. Whether we like it or not, our youth are the future. We all perish, we all die. And so it's the generations behind us that hold up the mantle. Pulled me aside into my office and she whispers, I've just been really concerned about this youth. I had him last year. She's a fourth grade teacher. I had him last year. And, we just think, and I quote, she said, I think he's going to be one of those kids that blows up the school.
She didn't. Wow.
End quote.
Welcome to another episode of the Race Relations Podcast. I'm your host, Kaleb Sinclair, and today we're going to be talking about youth homelessness. But before I get too carried away into that, I would like to take some time just to introduce our guest and just talk about how it is that we met, and that's going to kind of tie into this topic of youth homelessness because her approach to engaging with youth homelessness is one that I find very riveting. So I would like to welcome Alanah M. Dillard, licensed marriage and family therapist, and also a housing director. Alanah is the owner of Ace Odyssey Counseling Services, a mental health counseling and consulting group. As a licensed marriage and family therapist and clinical director, Alanah is a relational spacemaker, helping individuals and families navigate relationships with others by starting with their relationship with yourself, making space for transformation and inner healing. Over the last decade, Alanah has worked alongside community forward and youth adolescent-centered organizations, helping to educate folks on behavioral and mental health issues and joining in the collective fight for holistic wellness. In addition to her private practice, she serves as a program director for an international nonprofit. She works with the homeless and houseless teenagers by helping them return to their academic and socio-emotional goals by addressing all humans' basic needs, food and shelter, and mental stability. Alanah has been featured in Urban Faith and HopeLink magazine. Hey. In addition to executed visionary for the 2020 Freedom Room located in Seattle as a tribute and dedication to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Alanah also serves on the executive board for her beloved sorority, Zeta Phi Beta Sorority, Inc. Did I say that right?
Zeta Phi Beta sorority. Zeta Phi Beta.
Zeta Phi Beta. Okay. And is an active member of her church. Alanah reminds all of us, everywhere you go, you take you with you. Be the best you can be. I want to welcome you. Thank you, Alanah, for being with us.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, Kaleb. I appreciate the invitation and our conversation today. I'm really looking forward to sharing some things about my experience and certainly how we can shift the trajectory of our youth homelessness population, which interestingly, I just recently found out that the adult population of houselessness is starting to increase just as much as the youth and young adult mental health. So we are certainly in a pandemic, an epidemic when it comes to houselessness for our brothers and sisters in the community. So I'm looking forward to continue to do this work and sharing my experience with you all and all your listeners. So thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. When you speak of just the statistics on growth, I was looking as I was kind of preparing for this episode at some statistics, and some of the things that I found was, just for the listeners here, currently there are over 1,800 homeless youth under 25 in Washington State in 2022, according to Statista Research Department. 50% of homeless youth are unsheltered, sleeping outside in a car or someplace not meant for human habitation. In 2021, nearly a quarter, 23% of all people experiencing homelessness were aged 12 to 24, which is astronomical. And according to a study done at University of Chicago, the challenge of youth homelessness and housing instability is more pronounced among BIPOC ages, BIPOC youth, which we'll talk about, and housing instability is more pronounced as well, with 11% of American Indian and Alaskan Indian youth experiencing homelessness during a year, 7% Black and 7% Hispanic youth, and then 4% white or non-Hispanic identifying. and the ages are about 13 to 25, which is it's staggering how many homeless youth there are. Um, I never thought that there were so many kids out on the streets. And I think that's what really drew me to want to have you on this podcast is when we had met at a conference for the people listening
Mm-hmm.
and viewing, and Alanah was just telling everyone about the work that she does. And actually, why don't you tell us what it is that you do? Because your approach, at least I'll say this, her approach is going out to the youth on the streets, and I think that there's some magic to that, something that kind of shakes the trajectory of how we are doing care. And I find that I just want to know more about it. So, can you tell us a little bit about what your role is and what does it look like on a day-to-day basis?
Absolutely. I consider myself not only a spacemaker in my private practice, but as I do my work, I am a street therapist. I like to go where the youth are. I like to be in the trenches, you mentioned earlier about cars and places not meant for habitation. I've been
Mm-hmm.
to tent cities. I've been to trap houses. I've been to cars. I've been to car washes where youth were staying in car washes, from couch surfing to just finding a park bench to sleep on, to trying to sleep in some their friend's car, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe their friend's parents' car. I really enjoy really going on the street and working with youth because that's where they are. They're in their, I don't want to say natural environment, but they're in an environment that's not prescripted for how me as a professional wants to see them. So throughout my career, I've done crisis work on the streets. Again, that King County crisis number that you call. I've been the responder of that. I've been in hospital, psychiatric inpatient settings. I've been in clinics. I've been in residential settings. So sharing a home, being a house mom for houseless youth up to the age
Mm-hmm.
of 24 and a half. I have done private practice, of course, continue to do that, and certainly community mental health with the nonprofit organization that I work for. And I've also been in schools. So I've
Mm-hmm.
been that, I work alongside school counselors and do the mental health, behavioral health part of um, well-being in the
Mm-hmm.
school setting, meaning I've been inside of a teen health clinic. So like I had my psychiatric nurse, I had my secretary, and I had us in the same office embedded in a school. So I have touched nearly every sector, including juvenile justice and foster care, family
Wow.
court. I've touched every system of where youth are, from like I said, school and other ways. So I the most impactful way that I have found to do my work is to go where they are, not for them to come to me. Even when I
Mm-hmm.
have my private practice and clients come to my office and you talk to my secretary and you lay on my couch, it's different than me going to me being in their school and seeing them sitting in the back of their math class, or seeing them at lunchtime,
Mm-hmm.
or again out in the community with their hang out with their friends, or playing basketball, or trying to figure out where do I get Pampers and milk and formula for my children. I have
Mm-hmm.
a couple clients that I've worked with that are 14, 15, 16 with children and with very limited education, and certainly um, employment, employment experience. How do they get their basic needs met? So I have just found working on the streets where they are, going to them, has a more powerful, longstanding impact than them coming to me and this idea that I'm an authority and I know better, more than them. I know what's good for them and I should tell them what to do. I just don't feel, particularly for youth, that's not effective. They are in that crossroad of their development where they are trying to find independence. They are trying to express their agency. They are
Mm-hmm.
trying to create their own path that's maybe different than their family or whoever they grew up with. And so you telling them what to do is not helpful. You need to meet them where they are. And where they are sometimes is in the trenches of being on the street and in their own mental and physical world.
One of the things that stands out to me in what you're saying there is you're conscious of, again, like you said, where they're at. When I work with youth, as a mental health therapist on a day-to-day basis, it is so evident that they want to be at the forefront of what's going on with them, right? They want to be the one with the knowledge. They want to be the one making the decisions. They want to be the one discovering.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what made me kind of get drawn to your work is it seems like what you're saying right now, that you going to them allows for them to feel like they're in control, where oftentimes the systems that we are providing care within, it's the other way around, right? We're
Mm-hmm.
always on the doctor's orders, we're always on the therapist's orders, we're always on whomever's orders, the boss's orders, right? And you're kind of flipping that paradigm.
I'm reminded of a youth that I have worked with pretty consistently in the shelter. And it's a shelter down in South King County. And they can only stay there about 21 days. And then we got to figure out if it's reunification with the family, if it's another extended stay, is it somebody that can become maybe a kinship or a host home that can live with somebody else for 6 months temporarily, some respite type care. And I remember I met him, and it was like 2 weeks later. And I met him at the shelter. We did our intake, we scheduled. 2 weeks later, he was kicked out of the shelter for other reasons. So now where do I find him? So now I have to go, figure out where he is. And we had built a pretty quick relationship. And so he called me from some random phone number and was like, I'm staying over here. I'm going to be, kind of couch surfing with this person. It just wasn't a good fit there. Right. And so that kind of leads to the question about what do you need to be equipped to work with youth on the street and houseless and homeless youth. One is flexibility. It's not going to look in a pretty bow where they, again, come to you. The appointment starts at 2:00. They're sitting in your lobby at 1:55. You do a full hour session. No, it's not like that. It's multiple conversations throughout the day, text messages. Oh, you're in South King County. Oh, you're in North King County. Oh, now you're in West Seattle. Oh, now you're on the east side, within a matter of a day. And so really being flexible and adjusting to that. That's one thing that providers and clinicians and case managers and social workers doing this work with this population, you need to keep in mind, is being able to be flexible and adjust to where the youth are, because they are transient. And so, they're not typically in the same spot. Even if they attend school, or if they're enrolled in school, they may not be attending.
Mm-hmm.
And so just really being willing to go with the flow of the day to day, because it certainly won't look the same each day. You could have your day set out in the morning. Like when I worked at the hospitals, it was like, I know what patients I'm going to see. They're admitted. They live here. So where are they going to go? But when you're working with outreach and street youth and houseless youth, then you need to certainly be flexible and willing to adjust midday.
You spoke of that day to day. What is that day to day like? Where are you meeting these youth? What are the places that that they're congregating at, that you're going to, and finding them?
Absolutely. Well, first thing I do, I wake up and I do look at my schedule. I do like to have a schedule, but usually in my schedule it says reach out to these clients. Reach out in the morning. Usually it's a text message, because again, youth, and we're in the summertime right now, so youth are sleeping in. They're asleep till like noon. So the morning time is a good time to just do a lot of your paperwork, because that is certainly involved when you're doing any type of social services work. You need to be documenting. So in the morning, typically I will document kind of the previous day's work, if not get in preparation for the current day's work, and then text all my youth. If I don't hear from them by about 1:00, usually I call them and say, hey, we're still set to meet at this time or that time, or I'm going to be coming from this direction. I can meet you halfway, or do you know how to ride the bus? I can come to you, or you can meet me somewhere. So typically we meet at the youth's temporary home. I very much say temporary, because oftentimes they're not staying there very often. So it can be a friend's house. It can be a sibling, an older sibling's home. We've met at typically parks. I meet a lot of young people at parks or coffee shops. We do have an office, and some youth are able to take the light rail or the bus, and they can come to our office in the central Seattle area. And schools. I meet young people at school when school is in session, even actually when school is not in session, because that's a familiar place and it can be a place of refuge and safety. We've met on the school grounds, like in the parking lot or on the play structure or somewhere nearby. And Boys and Girls Clubs, my organization I work for has multiple sites. So we have shelters, we have gyms, we have swimming gyms, so we can meet at the alternative, like kind of like affiliated community Boys and Girls Clubs community spaces. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So those are generally the pockets where I find the youth, or sometimes it's let's jump on FaceTime right now, because they don't know where they're going to be. And so we're on FaceTime. They're either walking down the street, they're on the bus, or they are in between places. They're going to the DSHS office, or they're going to the food bank. They're going to the place to help with pay for the utilities. So they're oftentimes on the bus. They're moving around. So getting on FaceTime or a video call or getting on the phone can also be a time that I'm meeting with them. And again, it doesn't look like traditional outpatient. It doesn't certainly look like inpatient, where you're getting 50 minutes, you're getting 60 minutes to talk to a youth and sit down and let's talk about all the family problems and the trauma. No, it's you maybe get 20 minutes and I'm going to try to find some food for the night. I am going to try to get my cell phone paid, and I got to figure out where I'm going to sleep. Those are, the priorities. And then behind that, you can kind of get to more of the emotional work around, again, the trauma, the anxiety, the depression, and how that shows up, coping skills, crisis plans, those types of things.
So it's kind of the hierarchy of needs, right? Where it's like you need a place to stay, you need food, we need some sort of clothing, right? Resources. And then you're saying on the back end, we're going to get to like the socio-emotional kind of stuff, addressing the trauma. What does it look like for a lot of one of the things that I struggle with is this: America has so many misconceptions about homeless youth, or just homeless people experiencing homelessness, that does a lot of harm to the human realities that these people are going through. Oftentimes, even for myself, I'll say this in vulnerability, even for myself, it's hard to keep track of just the human that's behind the experience, because I think we've ostracized people that are experiencing homelessness so much that when I'm face to face with them, sometimes it's that human facet slips away from me, right? And so I'm curious for you, how in the work that you do, how did you approach some of the misconceptions and kind of destroy them in your mind, clear yourself from them to be able to reach the human that you're serving on a day-to-day basis?
Certainly. Well, I make it known to my clients and to my coworkers that I'm a woman of faith. And with that orientation, it allows me to see people in their humanity and for their vulnerability and their humanistic experience of pain, of setback, of disappointment, of limited love or appreciation or support. And so because that is my North Star, because that is my anchor in terms of seeing everyone as a child of the Most High, then I am able to more easily see someone in their struggle and be able to hold space. Again, going back to being a space maker, hold space for their pain, hold space for the identities or the stigmas or the accusations or the assumptions for them, and actually not just hold it when they have those experiences, but also be able to translate it, transform it, and really break it down and destroy it so that they are not, the individuals and the clients that I work with are not becoming so attached to that label, that identity of being lazy or bad or entitled or, leading to substance use and being a juvenile, being delinquent, and just being pessimistic. Like a lot of those things are, I believe, and again, as a family systems therapist, I see them not as diagnostics. I mean, that's not my primary way that I see young people. It's what we call in the DSM world, the V code. It's the context upon which they are in that manifest or makes present symptoms of depression, symptoms of anxiety. Now, yes, we certainly have the realities of some of the additional mind-altering diagnoses, such as bipolar or personality disorder, schizophrenia. Some of those, that is a very real experience for a lot of people, young people and older people. But on the day-to-day in the work that I see, a lot of our youth are just experiencing the symptoms of chronic PTSD based on their home environment. And then it's amplified because now, as you mentioned earlier, their basic needs, that Maslow's law, that those basic hierarchical needs are not being met. So that amplifies, again, everything else, that even if they were, if they were in a more secure, safe attachment relationship with an older person, an adult or adult figure, then the experiences of not passing a test or having a breakup or, having other life stressors. If they're in that environment of a safe home, then it might be better managed, more likely. But because they also have insecurity on the basic needs and then emotional disturbance, it makes it really challenging to sit in that place. So when I'm addressing those things from an individual level with a youth, um, it looks like me saying, close your eyes for a moment and imagine your dream. Like if you're actually, this is really what I say is if you're, because we're in a we're in a social world now, TikTok and Instagram. I'm like, if you made if you made a post or your picture was on an Instagram feed or a reel or a billboard, what would the caption say? What would the caption read? And oftentimes it is not what the labels and the stigmas have been to them, being lazy or bad or unmotivated or intentionally trying to be a delinquent, if you will. It is, I'm a great cook. I want to go to college. I want to have a family.
Wow.
I am resilient. I am smart. It's usually those type of narratives. So when I'm working with youth one-on-one, and then we'll get to the systems kind of macro level, but when I'm one-on-one with you, it's oftentimes holding the truth of their experience of behaviors that may have looked delinquent or lazy or what have you, but more so amplifying the voice and the narrative that they want in their life and the goals and the aspirations and the dreams that they have, which are not, they don't really go hand in hand. I try to amplify this one so that they can experience some hope and some inspiration and some belief that this too shall pass. And that's how I do it, kind of on a micro one-on-one level. And then certainly being a director and having sitting at tables and creating tables where system policies can be changed, laws can be adjusted or taken into context. The power of who's making the rules around this work and the misconceptions is very necessary for also a larger systemic kind of rippling impact. So I'll give you an example. When I worked in the school, I was the first clinician to hold this position. And so I was writing up an incident report that happened for a kindergartner. Okay, 5-year-old. The paperwork that I was asked to sign and asked to complete and report what had happened with the 5-year-old on the playground, the language was victim. The language was abuser. We have words like victim, abuser, and 3 strikes on paperwork for 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds. That's the pathology. That's the language we're using for an incident on the playground where somebody didn't want to share their toy. Who was the victim? He was the abuser.
Zoom in on that, because that there's something that I think people can miss in that. Why is that so significant, that language?
We talk about the school to prison pipeline. That is very true. We talk about the racial demographics, the profiling of what's bad and what's good. We have studies after studies that are even in its most recent time around the perception that people have around Black bodies, brown bodies, and white bodies. And by using language, not just the visual indoctrination of what is good and what is bad, what is right and what is wrong, but then we have language, we have pathological language that perpetuates that very thing, that they are less than, the oppressed, the marginalized, the separated. So at that young of age, kids are so very impressionable. We know that full brains aren't grown till the age of 26, but at that age, 5, 6, 7 years of life, not really knowing the world much, having experience certainly, seeing things certainly, but in terms of comprehension and mental conceptualization of what's happening in the world, to say that you were a victim or that you abused someone when it was just a misunderstanding, it sets the tone and it sets the identity that there's something wrong with them. It sets the anticipated expectation that you're going to be someone that is not welcome into society, that is a menace to society. And in fact, on a similar note, I was going back to the question of how do I address this on a mass level. I was in my office one day working at the school, and I had just seen a youth that was referred to me by the school counselor. The school counselor had been doing intervention with that youth and wasn't seeming to work. They were continuing to get in fights at school. They were leaving class. They were, talking back to the teacher, these types of things. So I sat down with the youth and I got to hear a little bit of his story about the upside down of his house. His mom had walked out, just left him and his brother. His dad was overwhelmed and overworked, and he was in 5th grade, but he was expected to basically parent himself. He's 10 years old.
Yeah.
10 years old, parent yourself. Your mom made a choice to leave your family, and your dad is overworked trying to put food on the table, and your grandparents are deceased. So yes, coming to school can be a challenge, even getting up in the morning. But my point is, after this young person, this client had left my office, a teacher, I love my teachers, but this particular teacher came to me and, pulled me aside. And this is a brown youth I was working with. She's pulled me aside into my office and she whispers, I've just been really concerned about this youth. I had him last year. She's a 4th grade teacher. I had him last year. And, we just think, and I quote, she said, I think he's going to be one of those kids that blows up the school.
She didn't. Wow.
End quote. And I said, excuse me? What do you mean by that? And she goes on to give evidence of why that was. And I said, wow, that's inappropriate. And I then escalated to my principal and superintendent. And, we got some things going on that front. But I'm just saying, language is power. It shows identity. So if she was bold enough to communicate with her words that that's what she believes, then I can only imagine in the classroom and walking amongst the campus, what type of energy, what type of feedback that this kid is getting from his environment, that he's not welcome there and that he is going to harm himself or other people. Not making space for the realities of him having to hold his own at 10 years old, having to get himself up at school, just the list goes on. So language is power, language is important, and we have got to be very, very mindful of how our paperwork is written, even how our documentation is used. We used to say, even this conversation right now, we used to say homeless and houseless, though. We are noticing that there was some research and some data around the word of homeless, which has a heavier connotation than houseless. They essentially mean the same thing, but the implications and the energy around being homeless and being houseless are different from a systemic portion. So it's just been something that we all have to be thoughtful and intentional about when it comes to the language that we're using around identifying behavior and attaching that to identity. Behavior is behavior. That's what it is. It's behavior. It's rooted. Behavior is only spun off of thoughts that are spun off of feelings that are spun off beliefs. So if we keep focusing on the behavior, well, they did this and they did this, then we're going to continue to get this revolving door in the incarceration system, this revolving door with houselessness, this revolving door with mental health, psychiatric places and hospitals. We need to get down to the layer of humanistic value work of who they are outside of that. That is circumstantial. That is not their entire identity. And that's the pieces that I work hard to pull apart and to re-narrate for our communities and our systems.
I mean, I love that you said that in terms of separating behavior from the person, and implementing behavior in terms of the context of the situation, right? In context of the environment, because I think one of the things that we often hear, or at least that I hear or see portrayed, particularly with people you said that are experiencing houselessness, right? Just so I'm getting that language right, is addiction, right? Like you had mentioned earlier, a lack of motivation or laziness, inability to groom oneself, or a lack of desire to groom oneself, to have any type of hygiene, and there may be a couple of maybe physical. They may be physically dangerous, right, to us, us if they're in proximity, right? I see that all the time if I'm on the train, and a person experiencing houselessness will walk in, and everyone will literally just evaporate as soon as, like, next to that person once they sit down, and it's like, whoa, what is being channeled right now in that moment, right? What are all the stereotypes, the misconceptions that are inside of the people that are making them just absolutely dissipate from that space, right? And it's the language that we use, it's the illustrations that we use, it's the visuals that we use in our society that program us as human beings to act differently around different people based on, again, maybe a behavior, maybe a perception, right?
I'm thinking about, I have two things in my head. The first thing is, if we really want to see the rawness of emotion, the rawness of humanity, the rawness of somebody really seeing somebody, go to a playground, go watch kids before first grade, usually pre-KK, young kids. They don't care what you look like. They don't care what you smell like. They just want to play with you. Will you play with me? And that is where I like to go to remind myself of why I do this work, that everyone, I believe, has the ability to tap back into the juvenile kind of innocence and value of someone else and their human experience. And if you see a kid fall down, another kid, are you okay? The other kid will go pick them up. Or they are running and they accidentally bump a kid. They will go, oh, I'm sorry, right? Like the rawness of humans and the basic foundational beliefs or values are rooted in children who haven't been exposed to, like you said, the language of what mom and dad say or grandparents say or older siblings say of like, oh, they're bad or they're going to do this or they're going to do that. But kids are really curious of like, oh, like you don't have shoes on. Where are your shoes? Versus demonizing them because they don't have shoes. And that leads me actually to my next thing that I see a lot too with youth is, again, this is my experience. This is how I see and how I do my work. Now, I do understand that there are outliers and it looks different in different communities and things. But I also get approached to come into situations where young people are stealing, especially in school. They're stealing. The question is usually not the question, but the behavior response is you get detention, you got to return the item, your parents gets called, those types of things. But who off or how often and who really asks the question, what are you stealing? What are you stealing? Not just that you are stealing. There's a need that has gone unmet. Whatever the need is, that's what one seeks. So if they're stealing, I don't know, an electronic, an iPad or an iPhone or, a computer versus food at the cafeteria or the lunch of somebody else, their classmate, or a keys to the storage cabinet or something, the teacher storage cabinet, right? Like just be curious about that, because when we work with youth, it's not all what you just see on the surface. There's something else driving that. There's something else behind that as to why they are doing what they're doing. But we don't always take the time, particularly in certain systems where it's high volume, limited staff, we're overworked, there's burnout, there's all those things that happen that we can't get to everyone. But that doesn't mean that we should change our approach. It just means that we need to change our perspective. It means we change our approach of how to meet the need just in a different way. Because we just don't, unfortunately, in our systems and layers, we don't have time to sit down with every student who is stealing to say, what are you stealing? Why is that? What needs do you have? Do you not have food at home? Where's your mom and dad or your grandparent? This is the behavior, return it, you got detention, next school day.
Yeah.
So that's a little hard to see, but I continue to do my work and believe that my impact is changing the trajectory of at least one youth. I can't change the world, and I believe that. I knew that in grad school. I knew I couldn't change the world, but I could at least impact and shift the person that's sitting in front of me, the system, the organization that's sitting in front of me.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's powerful. What is it that causes youth homelessness? I'm interested in terms of the systems, maybe on a systems level, the macro level, but also the individualistic level. I'm sure that there's maybe some storytelling that the youth participate in with you when it comes to, just enlightening you with what they've been through, whether it be some sort of trauma or, family situation. What are the ways that youth homelessness occurs that you've seen?
The main one being family conflict, which is generational. And I would say particularly for my experience as an African-American woman in the Black and Brown family in the diaspora, often the generational perspective, the generational approach to parenting is you do as I say, not as I do. And the I brought you into this world, I can take you out, right? And when kids start becoming of age, again, most of my population in my community work is 12 to 17. So when kids start becoming of age where they're expressing developmentally so, they're expressing their independence, they want some more agency, they want to be able to do things. A parent, we all operate from our own experience. And if we haven't healed our own childhood, if we haven't addressed our own triggers or activators or traumas, then we're only going to perpetuate that. We're only going to project it on the people closest to us. And as parents or guardians or caregivers, people who are parenting and caregiving for other people, younger people particularly, our kid will start to mirror and reflect our own stuff, our own insecurity, our own trauma, our own issues. And it can become a conflict because you haven't dealt with your little girl or your little boy or what have you. And then your child is expressing that very thing. And it's a little bit of a clash of the titans in the midst of them trying to express themselves and become more independent and go out and drive and have different relationships and do different things. So a lot of it is the family conflict because the parents don't necessarily have the skill set or even know where to start. I'd like to say I talk with a lot of parents who are like, I don't know what to do. I feel like one day they were my little baby girl, my angel, and then the next day I didn't know who this was, and they want to go out and do things that aren't even aligned to our family values. So a lot of times parents either know and they're choosing not to, or they don't know and they don't know where to start. And so that's when therapy comes in to be helpful to give them some more language, some more strategies, some more perspectives about how they can parent their child, care for their child at an age appropriate level while also setting boundaries and expressing love and consistency and support and rules of operation, essentially. So when that conflict gets high, because parents are operating from their own understanding, their own orientation of how do you do this thing called parenting and how do you run a household when you have multiple siblings or money stressors or health problems. I see that a lot where the parent has health problems. And then obviously that deteriorates their ability to show up as a parent and be present for that young person. But also the youth is trying to figure out their way. So if a parent is not able to consistently provide that North Star, then they're left to the devices, literal physical devices of their iPads and iPhones and things, but also to what the world is telling them that they should do or not do or be able to do. When communication is, so you get where youth is, where they're trying to express themselves, but they still need somebody to hold a backbone. And then you have parents who we're just flooded. We have a lot of responsibilities as adults and as caregivers. So when you get both of those in the same place, it causes some friction, and then communication breaks down, and then people say and people do things that they really don't mean in the height of the moment. So then kids are more apt because they don't have the skill like conflict management, conflict resolution, problem solving, forgiveness, understanding, communication, being willing to listen to what they have to say and then you listen to what you have to say versus my voice is louder than your voice and it's arguing and yelling. Those skills aren't really being cultivated. They aren't really being developed. And so when you come to a head with two entities or two persons, then it makes sense that it kind of blows up and the youth is like, I'm out of here. Or the caregiver parent says, you're not welcome in my home. You need to leave. And then they go out to a friend's house, couch surf, and it kind of trickles from there. So that's one of the main reasons I see is family conflict. So a lot of the work that I do is I do some family reunification. I do some individual and family therapy to address at least in a short sense, because I do 6 months, six to 8 months worth. They need more. Oftentimes family needs more than that, but 6 to 8 months or so of intensive family work just to kind of recalibrate and reset the narrative and the perspective of how do you do this thing called parenting? How do you do this thing called being a youth and a teenager? Like, yes, you're independent, but you still have curfew. Yes, you can go hang out with your friends, but you still need to get your homework done first, right? Like that balance and parental styles in that way and its accommodations. And then the secondly, in terms of how do youth become houseless? Well, some of that is how the youth chooses to express themselves, whether that if they're in the LGBTQ community or they are choosing to, become emancipated, right? When conflict is so high, emancipation is a thing. That's another place, another not place, another situation or circumstance that
Sure.
causes youth to be out of their homes, and trying to figure it out on the street, in the shelters, or at their friend's place. So those are the main things of the youth expressing themselves in an environment that is not conducive or supportive. And then family conflict. And then certainly adolescents, they're getting exposed to drugs and alcohol. So we know that when you have mind altering substances, marijuana included, when you have those things inside your system, because they're maladaptive coping skills, coping strategies for their stress that I just named, then yes, that can put somebody in a place of vulnerability to do things and say things that the ripple effect is being without support and having to fend for yourself in a street environment.
Right.
Foster care, that's
yeah.
another big thing that we can go on and on and on about that. But foster care is another system that in its essence is well intended, but in its application, not so much. It misses some big targets.
In what way?
Well, my experience too is just the families that are available to take the foster parents, right? So they have big hearts, and I believe foster parents do their best. That's my desire too, to be a foster parent. I love youth and working with kids in this way who've been in these circumstances, because they're primary guardians to whatever degree we weren't able to. But also, just like social workers or case managers, they're overworked. There's not enough resources. Kids are at different developmental stages when you receive them. And based upon the previous experience, when you have a youth that's back to back, I had a youth at one point, she was in third grade. And she had already been to 7 homes by third grade. 7 by third grade. So it just the capacity, the resources, the well-intended to provide homes and safe places for young people, but the resources to maintain it and to create real not longitudinal way, but massive support, I think, is missing. Longitudinal, yes, I have plenty of friends, your story you've shared with me too, in terms of how impactful and how amazing their foster parents were. And those stories are true, but unfortunately, there are stories where that relationship was very, very poor. I have a youth right now who unfortunately was in the foster care system, was adopted by that family, and the youth was also violated by that same adult. And so they are homeless because after the adoption, there was some inappropriate contact. And so that was a safe place. That was someone they trusted and they cared for. And then unfortunate circumstances has been the case that they were like, I can't be here. And so that youth is homeless. Currently, we have well-intended systems. It's just there's not enough of us to go around.
I would go back to that piece too of where you were talking about the importance of just emotional stability within the parents, that emotional intelligence within the parents. I find that in my work with families and youth, I see a lot of the times where parents, because of their trauma, like you were kind of talking about, are unaware that there even is chaos within the home, because it's just you've ritualized it, right? You've been conditioned, habituated to the chaos that you probably came from, that was instilled by your parents, right? And that is then passed down to your kids. So it becomes, like you were saying as well, this generational thing that has an effect on the child, and the child is going to create, some sort of internalized stress. And it's going to lead to, as you also pointed to, these coping mechanisms that look like addiction, or that look like substance use, which would be within addiction as well, or, certain behaviors, right? And then what happens too as well that I see is this reflective practice where it's seen by the parents, but then condemned by the parents, because again, we often as a society look at just the behavior. We don't ask, well, what's causing that behavior? And for those that work, within mental health, we know that addiction is caused by stress, right? It's caused by some sort of, it is a coping mechanism. Addiction is merely a coping mechanism to a lot of trauma and stress. And so I guess what I'm trying to get to is that emotional intelligence piece is so pivotal, because if you don't have that as a parent, if you don't address those issues that you have your background, where you came from, maybe what traumas that you carry, your triggers, right? Then it sets you up to not be able to empathize, right, with your child, to be with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And with empathy, as I talked to
That's
you
your. I know
before,
that that's your focus. That's your
that's my
bread and butter. That's your focus. Yep, that's your
right,
thing.
that's my
Yep.
focus, exactly. Like, it's, you have to be with you first, which they don't teach you, right? We always say project out into the community. I can feel your feelings, right? But I don't understand your feelings. Even if I do feel them, in terms of, like, you may feel sadness, that I can see that you're disappointed, right? We stop there if we
Mm,
haven't dealt with how we're actually feeling, and what's going on within us, right? Because your feelings often trigger certain emotions based on our past history,
mm,
right? And so if we haven't sat in that space of reflection and of deep kind of knowledge of self, then again, our bandwidth to be able to do the work of seeing past the behavior is so impacted, right? It becomes nearly impossible. So I think that that's something that just speaks to me in these situations that you're talking about, that cause child homelessness or
mm,
houselessness, is these
mm-hmm,
situations where there
mm-hmm.
isn't that, right?
I, you brought me to a memory that I had a couple months ago. It's similar but different in terms of our ability to sit with our own discomfort as adults, as parents, as caregivers, and our own emotion and how it's projected, right? So I was in my personal life, and of course I was in my personal life, but I wasn't working,
it's
and
all it's all good. Let us know.
I wasn't working, and I was off the clock. And I went to a family function, and it was a gymnastics birthday party. So all the little kids were doing the gymnastics. It's a 3 or 4 year olds, and so part of the birthday party, long story short, part of the birthday party was to sit in circles and like listen to the instructor, and then they were going to do flips and stuff and then do birthday cake. Well, this one little girl, she didn't want to sit in the group. So they would sit down, they would do exercises, they would stretch, they would touch their toes, the little 3 and 4 year olds. And the girl kept running around the gym. She was jumping in the ball pit, she was swinging on the thing, she was on the balance beam. And the teacher kept saying, so and so, come sit down with your friends. So and so, come sit down. So and so, we're doing this. And the little girl she wasn't disruptive. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't crying. She just was in her own world in this big gymnasium. Think about that. As a 3 and 4 year old,
It's a
you're in a
candy store.
gymnastics studio. She wants to play on everything, do the tumbling mats and all the things. And so the parent, I noticed the parent getting a little antsy of like, so and so, go sit down, go listen to the teacher. And so the parent ended up getting up, going on to the gym floor, the mat floor, the floor, picking up the child and taking the child and saying, "We're going home." And the
Mm.
girl started crying. She said, "I don't want to go home. I don't want to go home." And no. Yeah. And then the parent said, "We're going home because you're not listening. We're going home because the teacher's telling you to sit down." And the little girl, she's 3 or 4 years old, and she kept saying, "I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm okay." And the parent said, "No, you're not. No, you're not. You're not okay. You're not listening. You're not okay." So in
Mm.
that snapshot as a 3 and 4 year old, you in yourself believe that you're okay. You're safe, you're comfortable, you're protected, you're loved, and you're saying, "I am okay. There's nothing the problem. I am okay." But you have an adult figure who says, "You're not okay." It's a little tangential to what we were talking about, but it
Yeah.
talks about how do we groom, how do we cultivate, how do we teach, how do we parent, how do we coach our children to acknowledge, to, like you said, both acknowledge, you said we 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 acknowledge it, but then we condemn at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't the parent didn't say anything about, "I know it feels in your body that you're okay, but right now we need our listening ears on. Right now we want to listen to the teacher. I know you feel safe because you are safe." There is no
Mm.
affirming of that. It is, "You are not okay and we are going home because you're not sitting down in the circle with the kids." So that contradiction. So I don't know. I didn't get too into it. I didn't talk to the parent. I didn't give him my business card. I was just thinking in my mind, I wonder now what that little girl might think about. Can she trust herself? Can she trust her own emotions? Can she trust that she is okay or not okay when a parent that cares for her and loves her, and I'm sure parents are all the things, just canceled, just said, "No, you don't." Just challenged all the things that you believed that you were without any acknowledgement that you might feel okay. But right now is the time to listen to our teachers. Then we're going to get a chance to play. None of that was said, at least in my presence. So it's just a little example of how parents, I don't know what was going on for the dad. I don't know anything about his story, but perhaps, he was feeling some of his own uh, trigger or his own discomfort with what a parent means and being able to control your child, because that is true. If your child is running around, then it's the view that you can't control your kid. And I
Right.
don't know what he might have internalized or what he has internalized around, oh gosh, I got to control my kid because these parents are looking at me and she's the only little girl not sitting in the circle. So I don't know, but that was just an example.
No, I love that example. I think that's a very poignant example because, I mean, that leads me to the next question I have. A lot of these kids, I would imagine all of these kids that are experiencing houselessness have core beliefs that they have ingrained from trauma, from systems, from societal perception, which would be trauma, right? Like, what are the core beliefs that you see the most within these kids? Uh, and again, I always use this illustration for core beliefs, just for the people that are listening. Core beliefs are these things that navigate us. That I always use the illustration of, we are either driving in a car where we have our own pirate ship, and when we're born, we are born into the world and we're steering this, right?
Mm,
We have a sense of our feelings, we have a sense of what we need, we have a sense of
mm-hmm.
authenticity, Gabor Mate would say. um, and when we're injected into relationships, into society, without us consciously knowing, oftentimes we are ejected from that driver's seat, and these core beliefs come in that then take the helm and are steering us in our
Mm,
lives. And it can lead to all different types of avenues, all different types of behaviors that can cause damage to us, because what is often injected is, well, damage, right? It's different messages that are forced upon us without our acquiescence or without our
mm-hmm.
permission. And I'm just interested for
Mm-hmm.
you, like, what are these things that you're seeing and hearing from the kids when it comes to their core beliefs?
I love this conversation because I did not come out of grad school with this perception and this perspective, even. It was through my work with the houseless population, through my inpatient time, my crisis work, my residential work, that I began to recognize, even for myself. I tell all my clients, and I'll tell on your audience here tonight, is that I have my own therapist. I have my own mentors. I have my own life coaches. I have my own spiritual advisors. Like I believe, and this is my orientation, I will never ask my client to do something that I have not done or I wouldn't be
Mm,
willing to do. And so, to your point of, I have been able to become a better therapist because I have become a better client. I have been able to see myself and my own biases and myths and beliefs and um, stereotypes and things that I hold as an individual and a person in a country, in this country, in this world, to then be able to again make space for my clients and their rawness of their experience of themselves in the world and in the systems that I too live in, but from a different perspective. And so through my own self discovery, I have then put emphasis on values, one's core beliefs, and one's identity as self. Because as I mentioned earlier, our values give rise to beliefs that give rise to our feelings that give, excuse me, our thoughts that give really rise to our feelings that give rise to our behaviors. So if you in your core believe that you um, were unwanted, that nobody wants you, that nobody loves you, that you're bad, that you're a failure, that you will never do right,
mm,
then your beliefs come to it be now a statement of I am bad. Nobody wants me. No one loves me. Or to be loved is to be abused. To be loved is to be violated. That then gives rise to thoughts of, yeah, I guess they're right. Maybe that is true. To the feelings, to the thoughts, and then to the behaviors of blowing out of classrooms, failing classes, poor relationships, those types of things. Um, so when I think about and when I work with youth around that, I like to go back as far back to the origin of their conception as possible. I ask the question, do you know your conception story? Yes, you
that's a
have a mom
powerful
and a dad.
question. Yeah.
But do you know your conception story? Were you wanted? Like, excuse me, I don't say that. Excuse me. I say, were you planned?
Mm.
Were your mom and dad in a relationship? Where were you born? What was the state of your mother? She have an easy pregnancy? Um, was your dad around during the time of your labor? So there's 5 stories, and I'll give credit to Keandra Jackson. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist out of California who introduced this concept to me around your 5 stories, one of them being your conception story and going back to the origin. And you as an adult or you as a young person, you may not know, but then you have to ask questions of your grandparents or whatever. But the point is, it starts in utero of how you came into this world. All of that, I believe, energetically does go into the fetus and does come out when you are born. And then you have your conception story, your pregnancy story, your labor story, and then your birth to 5 story. And all of those stories can look different. And depending on what they were, that's when we start to build values and beliefs and core interpretations of self and identity. And so that's a lot of the time that I spend with the youth are, what are your values? What's your conception story? What are your beliefs and your values? And what does that mean? What do you make that mean? If you were not planned, your father wasn't present. So what do you make that mean? That means that you aren't loved in your mind, that you were abandoned, which is true because your father's not there. But how do you then use that to recreate your own story to say, but that's part of my story, but that is not the end of the story. That's a chapter, but not it's the entirety of the book. And so that's a focus that I do too around conception, values, beliefs, kind of getting down to that core identity piece.
I think that that's a wonderful approach. I think that allows someone to really dig into the legitimate kind of meaning making that they have, right? Oftentimes we don't understand. I didn't understand this for myself, even I think till I was, maybe went to grad school, because my whole grad program was about meaning making. That we make meaning out of the experiences that we go through, and it's whether it's a conscious or subconscious thing, that meaning is still being made, right? And like, again, that has a lot to do with how we behave, how we feel, and who we also engage ourselves with, or who we don't, right? Do we think that we're worthy to go and seek out relationships that may yield a beautiful, new reality? Or do we stay in the pit of hopelessness that we currently reside in because we don't think that we have a sense of value, right? It's something that I work with quite often with my clients. And I hear that same kind of pathway that you're talking about right now. I'm conscious of the time, but there's still a couple of things that I would like to uncover if we could.
Sure.
And again, we don't need to solve youth homelessness today. I think we're just creating a dialogue, and so I don't want to create that sense of pressure. But what are the racial impacts of it, right? Because there is a larger population that is BIPOC that is experiencing houselessness. What have you seen in that arena? What should people know about it that you think is important?
Be willing to go outside the box. Our systems are very much set up with, like, for example, I have a youth that I've worked with that I'm working with, and the protocol is the referral comes in, and we do a screen on the phone, and then we do an intake, and then we get started. This youth is very transient. They have a lot of things going on in their life. So I actually haven't even done an intake, but I talk to this youth multiple times a week. And the youth will even introduce me. Oh, I'm talking to my therapist. Oh, my therapist. Oh, I'm talking to my therapist. And one day I was like, I'm actually not your therapist yet. I'm actually just working with you from a case management perspective because we actually haven't done the intake. I need to actually do the paperwork and do the intake before you technically consider my client. And he was like, oh, okay, well, what do we need to do? Right? Like, we had already built such a relationship that he already trusted me and he believed me and he wanted to continue to work with me and through his circumstances. So when I say go outside the box, when we're talking about brown and Black youth, when we're talking about Native youth and brown bodies. It goes back to what I said earlier about finding that we are not invincible. Our Blackness and our brownness is not a pass of being invincible. That's all I can say it. We still hurt. We are wounded. Yes, absolutely. Am I a proud African American Black woman? Yes. And the resiliency and the ancestry of my people? Absolutely. But that does not negate the fact that we hurt too, that we have stories too, that we have pain too, that we need help too. And so firstly, it's recognizing and valuing brown bodies and honoring them as valuable, not just like, oh, they'll get through it. Oh, they're resilient. Oh, they're strong. Yes, that is true, because we've had to be, not because we just because.
Because we would love to be.
Thank you for that language, because we would love to be. So just to start, the Black and brown bodies, Native bodies, Latin bodies, Asian bodies, Caribbean bodies, the brown and Black diaspora, those bodies, we are bodies and we are human and we bleed red just like everybody else. And so changing that perspective or internalization or narrative, for starters. And then when we do show up, that's why representation matters. I became a therapist. I became the person I didn't have. I went to an all-white school. I was one of 732 in my graduating class.
You said 107.
I'm sorry, one of six. One of six in a class of 732. I was one of six in a class of 732.
Yep, I've been there too.
So I wanted to be the person I didn't have.
Yeah.
And that's why representation matters. And that's why I go into the school. That's why I go into communities. That's why I want to be the face of my work and the perspective that I bring to clients. Because one of the usual questions is, are they Black? Like, are they not white? Like, and then they find out that I'm African American, that I'm Black, and they're like, oh, I want to work with her, right? Not saying we still don't have our dynamics in between that, but still, it's the right of acceptance and automatic acceptance of I see you and you see me. So that's one of the things that I also find value in doing this work, and contradicting or shifting the narrative, even inside the Black and brown community, particularly African American. I'm saying, when I call parents and I'm like, I'm a Black woman too, the single mom is like, so you get it. Yeah, I get it. And mama, I got some new tools for you. And mama, I know grandmama and them, big mama and them, and uncle and them. I know how we used to do it, but where we are now with teens, we got to shift our parenting a little bit. And so using that to my advantage, being a woman of color in the space, being able to do that. So it's going outside the box, it's doing something different. Again, my manager has said, have you enrolled that kid yet? No, we'll get there. I'll enroll them eventually. I'm doing great work with them anyway. So just going outside the box, thinking, how can we meet the youth again? Not just physically where they are, but also mentally and culturally where they are. And for those that are listening that are not of the Black and brown diaspora, just the acknowledgement that you may not understand the experience or may not know the experience, but you're coming with a humble heart. You're coming with some type of cultural sensitivity, some type of cultural humility to say, I know I don't look like you, or, ethnically and racially, I don't look like you, but I do see your humanity. I'm human, you are human. That is the race that we share. And I want to be the best case or not just the best case manager, but I want to support you in your journey in a way that fits for you and where you are and the things that you need. So those are some things that I would think that we as a society, stereotypically white social workers, can do better with, just acknowledging the difference. Yeah. Youth are so, they will tell you, I don't rock with you. I'm not cool with, they'll tell you that. But if you don't come forward and say, hey, I recognize I'm a white woman, or I'm, older or younger, or, I don't look like you or whatever. Like, I've never been homeless. I've never been in foster care. I've never been in the incarceration system or juvenile justice. Just say that. And we can just clear the table right now. So they know that that I know that we know that we can go ahead and move forward, and we don't have to dance around the white elephant in the room that you're somebody who doesn't get me and doesn't understand. If you are choosing to work with houseless, homeless population, if you are not just choosing, but if Black and brown folks come on your caseload and you're working with them in the community, and you're of our white brothers and sisters, Caucasian or white passing, then you need to just acknowledge that and recognize that that there is that difference there, but what your core value is helping them be the best person that they can be or obtain their goals or whatever. And so hopefully I answered your question. I kind of talked about a few things, but that what comes to mind when I think about race, ethnicity, and how it shows up in the homeless, houseless community and population that I serve. Humanity, we're missing that, and acknowledgement, we're missing that too. And that's
Thank you for that.
why we continue to have open doors, amongst other contributing factors and drivers, certainly. But those are some things that I see.
What would you say to the listeners that maybe are just everyday people? They don't work with, I won't be working with, people youth struggling with houselessness. What is it that the society and inside the society, us as individuals can take with us to help us engage or maybe perceive youth experiencing homelessness in a different way?
Education is important, knowledge is power, and taking the time out when you see something on the street or on the news, or you hear a story on your social media timeline or Facebook feeds, rather than scrolling or they probably deserved it, or whatever the other things that we may think, and the stereotypes and misconceptions around houselessness and how one becomes on the street. To just take a moment to tap into your own humanity and imagine your child at the age of 12 being kicked out, your niece, your nephew, 14 and pregnant, your little cousin, or your bonus son or daughter, your stepson or daughter, being in 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, and not having a place to go. When we begin to see ourselves and other people, I believe, like you said, that goes into that empathy and that compassion for someone else. But if we stay in our own world and, I did this all by myself, and if I can do it, they can do it. If we stick inside of that, then we're going to continue to miss each other and continue to indirectly, directly, covertly, and overtly perpetuate the cycles that we see in the epidemic that we see with the houseless population. So again, when you see people, see stories, hear stories, tap into your own human experience. Say, wow, I can't even imagine what that's like to. I have a youth who became in foster care because both of her parents died in a car accident. So their parents were both in the car, so they went to foster care. The foster parents weren't a good fit. They ran from the foster home, and that's why they're at shelter. The kid had nothing to do with that. Their parents died. Imagine both of your parents. Imagine you and your spouse or you and your partner passing away, and what is going to happen to your children or your grandchildren. So just that humanity piece, if you're not, of course, becoming educated about other factors and systems and how it perpetuates, and go to the places that you are. I'm all about that. If you're on boards, or if you're in churches or mosques or temples, or you're on, advisory boards at your job or in the community, you give to charity, where's your philanthropy? And figure out if that's where you want to continue to place your dollars, your time, your money, and your effort. And if you want to do more and you see more for our human people and for our kids, because whether we like it or not, our youth are the future. Our generation, every generation passes away. We all perish. We all die. And so it's the generations behind us that hold up the mantle. And if they fail, that means we failed.
That's powerful.
So let's just take a moment to take that in.
Yeah. Alanah, I truly appreciate your perspective. You've shared so much today. My last question is just this. I know you touched on it a little bit before. What is it that inside of you, maybe different connotations of like community, spirituality, values you talked about as well. What is it inside you that allows you to work with the houseless population? Because the work's not easy, right? I'm saying that even as someone who's a mental health therapist and, is dealing with people that are going through all types of stuff. But houseless population it's a heavy place to be in, right? What is it that gives you the ability to do the work that you do?
I believe this is my life assignment. And I believe we get lots of assignments, but this is my life assignment. This is my purpose. This is my calling. I pray for my clients. I pray for my strength, my endurance, my clarity, my peace inside of the work that I do. And I continue to do my own work. I mentioned earlier, as I do my work, as I'm a client, I become a better therapist. And I do my own work, seeing my own blind spots, and certainly being grateful for my own blessings and my own life journey, not having experienced houselessness, but having it touch people that I care about, people that I love, and wanting to do more. And this is how I show up in the world. And I do it because, again, it goes back to I see you and me, and I am you and you are me. And if I had a daughter, a niece, a nephew, a godchild, a little cousin that was in your circumstances, when I see your name come up on my caseload, that could be any of us. That could be any of us. And my dad used to say, we are only one decision away from this or that. We are all only one decision. Doesn't matter how much money you have, doesn't matter what your health status is. We are all one decision away from finding ourselves in a place that we never thought we would be. So let's increase our empathy and our compassion for ourselves, and certainly for each other. And that orientation of my faith and my calling and my belief about self allows me to continue to do this work in a very whole way. It's not, I bounce around different subsets of populations, but the youth and crisis youth and trauma, that is very dear to me. And I am able to do it because I do my own work. It hasn't gone without my own tears. It hasn't gone without my own frustrations. But it's the work that I want to do and continue to create legacy again for the generation behind me. That's all I can leave. I can't leave money. I mean, I could leave money, I could all that, but really the essence of a community is based on the hearts of a community. And that's the work that I choose to do, is tap into the heart work.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us today, just your heart and your wisdom and the work that you do. I hope that a lot of people take just all the wisdom that was within this episode. If you could just tell us where to find you, how to support you, or how to just seek wisdom from you in different healing ways, we'll close the show up. But where can we find you at?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Kaleb, for this podcast and for this space to just talk and share. You can find me on Instagram at Ace Odyssey _CS, Ace, ACE, Odyssey, ODYSSEY _ as in counseling, SCS, and also on our website, aceodysseycounseling.com. So can I share a little offering that I have coming up? I'm really excited.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, that's right. You had an offering. Yes, go ahead. Share that, please.
I'm so excited. My business partner and I are really excited. We're going to be offering some teen groups, some parent groups in the coming spring. So registration will be opening this fall. So if you are a young person, if you're a teenager between the ages of 8 and 18, or you are a parent, parenting or caregiving for a young person in that age, or you're just a parent that just wants to be around other parents and find new ways to parent and to be whole in this world that has so many conflicting distractions, we are going to be offering some weekly or bi-weekly groups for about 10 to 12 folks at a time for the spring 2024. So feel free again to reach out to me at aceodyssey.com, aceodysseycounseling.com, or aceodyssey _CS about more information. We'll be sharing it on my social media pages. But group therapy coming soon for teens, as well as parent groups, mom groups, dad groups, or caregiver, grandparent groups coming soon. So really excited about offering some things for teenagers too: self-esteem, depression, anxiety, mental health 101, trauma. We want to start creating group settings. Individual is great and powerful, but a bigger impact. And we know that there's a lot of strength and therapeutic growth and healing that comes in group settings. So we'll be offering some groups coming soon. Exciting.
Very cool. That is very exciting. Very exciting. And I will also make sure to link, Alanah, your website in my kind of just summary of the episode, both on Spotify and YouTube, and my other kind of mediums that I have the podcast on, and also on our website as well. Again, thank you so much, listeners and viewers. This was a wholesome episode. I hope you all took a whole lot from it. And you know where you can find me, www.racerelationspodcast.com. You can find us on Instagram, Race Relations Podcast, and YouTube, Spotify, and Google Podcast as well. And please, again, like I always say at the end of the show, like and subscribe. It just helps us to be able to create more content, have more guests, and just invest more into searching for answers. And we'll see you next time. Bye.